Hello everyone, welcome back to a new video, and today I wanted to share with you all some recommendations for epistolary novels. I am very excited for this video. I love epistolary novels so much, and I think the main reason is the feeling that I get when I read an epistolary novel, where I feel like I'm really getting a deeper look into the character's thought processes. Although my preference is third-person omniscient for narrative structures, I just find with the epistolary novel, I feel a deeper connection to the characters for the most part. There are exceptions, but for the most part, I just feel like this form of telling a story just pulls back even more layers than an omniscient narrator can. That's just my personal opinion. That's how I feel when I read an epistolary novel, and I know it's not for everyone. I know some people really don't like it, and that's totally fine, but I just wanted to share some of the books that are within this epistolary format, and some of them are not all-time favorite reads, but I still wanted to share them as I think they are great epistolary novels as well. I'm also going along with the Wikipedia definition of the epistolary novel, which says, "It is a novel written as a series of letters between fictional characters of a narrative. The term is often extended to cover novels that intersperse documents of other kinds with the letters, most commonly journal entries, newspaper clippings, etc." And then with the rise of technology, we have emails now as well, blog posts, etc. I don't believe any of the books I have in this list feature emails. I believe all of them are journal entries, letters between characters. For those of you who also enjoy an epistolary novel, I would love to know why. What are the reasons that you enjoy reading journal entries, letters between characters, that kind of thing? What is it that makes the reading experience more enjoyable for you? And if you don't like the epistolary format, I would also like to know why. We can discuss further in the comments, whatever your opinion may be. After I've gone through the recommendations, I will also give a smaller list of epistolary novels that I have not yet read that are on my TBR. And I would also love more recommendations. So if you know of a novel that I have not listed in this video, please do let me know in the comments, because I'm always on the lookout for a great epistolary novel. So we'll start off with the book that I consider the book that really got me into epistolary novels. Because of this book, I realized I actually really like reading letters between characters. I find it very interesting, and I feel like I'm snooping into their personal lives, and I always enjoy that. So the book that I'm talking about is Evelina by Frances Burney. This is an 18th century novel, and the entire book is in the epistolary format, and it is letters between various characters. This is such a fun story. It's so funny and satirical, and Evelina is such a funny character. We're just reading letters between Evelina and various characters, and then other characters with each other. The majority of this book is about Evelina's coming out into the London scene. There's a dash of the unrequited love trope, which is very fun, and I just really enjoyed this novel. Although it's not a favorite, I still very much enjoyed it and would recommend if you like the epistolary format and if you like to read classics. It's a really fun one. Next, we have another classic, and that is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I loved this book so much, and I love that it is all in journal entries. We have journal entries from the main character, Jonathan Harker, who travels to Transylvania to meet Count Dracula, basically because Dracula wants to buy some property in England. And Jonathan Harker is a young lawyer, so he is helping Count Dracula with the purchase. And then we meet a bunch of other characters. We have Mina, Lucy, Professor Van Helsing, and we have journal entries from a bunch of different characters as well, not just Jonathan. And I just thought that the epistolary format was perfect for this type of narrative. It just made it so much more atmospheric. It felt like I was with the characters experiencing all the very unsettling things going on, and it was just such a good read. A really good read for this time of year as well. And as someone who does not like vampires, and I'm not into paranormal books, I thought this book was amazing. I loved it so much. I also liked that it was set in Transylvania. I am Romanian, so a lot of the descriptions were very familiar, and I really enjoyed that as well, but I would highly recommend this one. I would also recommend Lady Susan by Jane Austen. It is a very short novella featuring letters between characters as well, and it says, "Beautiful, flirtatious, and recently widowed, Lady Susan Vernon seeks an advantageous second marriage for herself while attempting to push her daughter into a dismal match." It is hilarious. It is so silly, and Lady Susan is one of the most unlikable characters, but she's so unlikable that she's likable, if that makes sense. I just loved this novella so much. It's very fun, and of course it's told in letters, which I adore. Next up is a Bronte novel, and I could be wrong, but I believe this is the only Bronte novel that is fully epistolary, and that is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. And in this one we have Gilbert, and he is the narrator. He's telling the story through a letter to his friend, and the reader, we're kind of in the place of his friend receiving Gilbert's letter. And he tells the story of this woman named Helen who moves into Wildfell Hall, and she seems to be very mysterious, and I don't want to say anything else because I went into this book blind and I enjoyed it all the more for that. The back of this edition spoils quite a bit of the story, and I don't understand why publishers do that, but just do be wary if you see summaries of the story, it may spoil it. But anyways, it is a really good one as well, and I would recommend. All right, so we have 2 more classics in this list, and next up is one that I'm currently rereading, and that is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. I have gotten a head start on Victober because I couldn't help myself, so I decided to reread this one, and I'm having such a good time. I'm almost halfway through. But this one is a story told fully in journal entries, which is awesome. I love the way that this story is told, and I think journal entries suit the narrative perfectly. It is a very slow burn kind of mystery. We have Walter, who's on his way to start a new job, basically as an art instructor, and on his way he meets this woman. It is the middle of the night, so it's very eerie, and she's dressed head to foot fully in white and seems to be on the run. And so he helps her and she goes on her way, but then afterwards he sees these men approach a police officer stating that a woman has recently escaped from an asylum, and Walter tries to figure out what's going on. And then we meet some amazing characters once he arrives for his new teaching position. We have Marian Halcombe, which is one of my favorite female characters of all time, and then we get some of her journal entries as well. There is something going on with Marian's sister, and that's like a whole other thread of the mystery. The 2 story threads really start to intertwine, and it's just such a wonderful book. I love it so much, and I love that it's epistolary. It's perfect. I would highly recommend this one. And next is a book that isn't really an epistolary novel, but I am counting it for this video because I love it so much, and it's just wonderful. And we're getting closer and closer to the Christmas season, and this is a perfect Christmas read. And I am talking about Letters from Father Christmas by J.R.R. Tolkien. I cannot recommend this enough. It says, every December, an envelope bearing a stamp from the North Pole would arrive for J.R.R. Tolkien's children. Inside would be a letter in strange, spidery handwriting and a beautiful color drawing. They were from Father Christmas, telling wonderful tales of life at the North Pole. How all the reindeer got loose and scattered presents all over the place. How the accident-prone polar bear climbed the North Pole and fell through the roof of Father Christmas' house into the dining room, etc., etc. If you love Christmas and you love letters, you love epistolary novels, you love all of that, you need to read this book. It is precious. There are also many illustrations that were included, full color illustrations, which is wonderful. And I felt like a child again reading this book. I felt like it was my dad writing letters to me at Christmas time. Just an example of his beautiful writing. I loved this so much. Highly recommend. Going off of that recommendation, we have a historical fiction novel that is also set during the Christmas season, and that is The Last Christmas in Paris by Hazel Gaynor and Heather Webb. This is one of my favorite books of all time, one of my favorite historical fiction novels of all time, and it is also fully told through letters. I'll just read a short blurb from the back. It says, Christmas time in Paris. Thomas Harding travels to the City of Lights, a packet of cherished letters in his hand. Letters that tell a story of love and loss, friendship and family, and the innocent hopes of a generation devastated by war. As he reads the letters one more time, Tom is transported back to 1914 and the sunlit August day when Evie Elliott waves goodbye to him and her brother Will as they head to the Western Front. I'm not going to read the rest, but it is just beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. There were so many heartwarming moments and moments that brought tears to my eyes, and I don't think this novel would have packed the punch that it did if it had not been told in letters, and it was just wonderful. If you like stories set during World War I, if you like historical fiction, if you like Christmas time, this is a must read, and it's just beautiful. It is so, so beautiful. We have 2 more historical fiction novels that are told fully through journal entries, and the first one here is The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, Volume 1. I recently finished Volume 2 and did talk about that in my big summer wrap-up. I'm loving this series so much. It is basically about Emma, who lives in a sort of Victorian era England. It's kind of like a fictional England set in a pseudo-Victorian era, where we have a lot of things that don't really make sense. They're kind of fantastical things going on, but I would not consider this to be a fantasy novel. We do have events happening in London, but then we also have the fictional village or town, I guess, of St. Crispians. The author is hilarious. The series is so fun, and I'm hoping to read the 3rd volume very, very soon. Like I said, the entire book is told through Emma's journal entries, but it's just so fun. Highly, highly recommend. And if you like the idea of reading a very spunky young Victorian lady's journal entries, this is a really fun one. And then the other historical fiction novel is Marmee by Sarah Miller, and this book is beautiful. It captured my heart. Little Women, I'm sure you all know, I say it all the time, but it is my favorite book, and so when I realized that this book existed, I had to have it. It is basically the events of Little Women, but as seen through the eyes of Marmee, and it is all Marmee's journal entries throughout the many years that Little Women takes place over, and it was just beautiful. I loved this book so much, and if you love Little Women, if you love Marmee, please do give this a read. It is amazing. I love the fact that we got deeper into Marmee's mind and her perspective on everything that went on, and I just loved it so much. Would highly recommend. Next up is a fantasy novel that I enjoyed. It wasn't an all-time favorite, but I did find it very enjoyable, and I'm hoping to read the 2nd book soon. I actually have it checked out from the library, but the book I'm talking about is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. It is the 1st book in this series, and in this one we have Emily, who is a scholar of fairies, and she's writing her first encyclopedia about fairies. And she travels to this place. It is a fictional place, but it feels very much like Iceland, that kind of atmosphere. She doesn't really fit in this village because she is very standoffish, she's very introverted, and the townspeople aren't the biggest fan of her. But as she's working on this encyclopedia, she starts to notice very unsettling things going on. We also have Wendell Bamblebee, who shows up. He basically followed her, and they are academic rivals, they butt heads, and so there's a little bit of the enemies to lovers trope. And it's fun. It's a really, really fun story. I do like that it is all in journal entries as well. And because she is writing an encyclopedia, we also have footnotes at the bottom that make the book feel very scholarly as well. So this is another really, really fun epistolary novel. I also have a science fiction novel to recommend, which if you've been around for a while, you know I don't really read science fiction. But this one was a 5-star read. I really, really enjoyed it when I read it a couple years ago. And that is The Martian by Andy Weir. This one was so fun, and it is also, in my opinion, it is epistolary because it is told through log entries. We have this man named Mark who ends up stranded on Mars. This big storm led to his crew needing to evacuate Mars, and they left him behind, not knowing if he made it, if he survived. It's basically his story of trying to survive, using his engineering skills to try to survive, make sure he doesn't run out of food. There are very, very high stakes. It is very, very propulsive, and I just could not put this book down, and I love that it is log entries. So it feels very personal, like we're really there with Mark. It was a really, really good one as well, and as someone who does not like science fiction all that much, I thought it was great, so I would recommend this one as well. I did want to mention 2 other books that are not epistolary novels per se, but they do kind of feature letters in a certain way. And so first is Born of Gilded Mountains by Amanda Dykes. This one I talked about in my big summer wrap-up, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but it does feature letters between pen pals when they're young. The majority of this book is not told through letters, but it does feature that. So if that's something that sounds interesting, I would recommend. And of course, you can hear more of my thoughts on this in the wrap-up, which I'll have linked down below. And then a fantasy that I feel would be enjoyable if you do like the epistolary format and you do like fantasy novels as well, and that is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This book is set in a fantasy world that feels very much like England during World War I, and there is a war happening between opposing gods, but it feels very much like the Great War, only instead of countries, it is gods warring. And Iris's brother goes missing on the front lines, and so she's typing these letters with her typewriter and putting them beneath her wardrobe door, and they disappear, and she doesn't know where these letters go. Iris doesn't realize that when she's putting these letters under her wardrobe, they are transported to the home of Roman, who is basically her rival. They both work at the same paper, and they really don't like each other. But I like what it says here. It says, when he anonymously writes Iris back, the 2 of them forge a connection that will follow Iris all the way to the front lines of battle for her brother, the fate of mankind, and for love. There were definitely things in this book that I did not like. I would definitely look up other content and trigger warnings for this book, but for me personally, I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to the 2nd book. I just need to read it already. But I did want to recommend this one as well if you like the idea of characters writing letters to each other. I just loved it. It was so, so good. All right, and then to end off the video, I just wanted to mention a few books that are on my TBR for epistolary novels. This first one is not a novel, but It is a collection of letters, and I love letters so, so much, and that is the Complete Letters of Elizabeth Gaskell. This is almost 1,000 pages long, so this is one that I'm definitely going to spend my time reading. I don't care if it takes me years to read it, but I love reading letters, so I'm very, very excited for this. It is not an epistolary novel, but I had to mention it. This next one is technically nonfiction, as they are real letters as well, but it is dubbed a beloved classic, a 20-year correspondence between an American writer and British bookseller, and I'm talking about 84 Charing Cross Road. This has been on my TBR for a while, and it is very short, so maybe I'll read it this fall. It just sounds like something I would really, really like. Yeah, I don't want to know too much going into it, but I am very intrigued. This next one I don't know very much about, but it says it is fantasy, which is interesting. It is The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis, and it says, at once wildly comic, deadly serious, and strikingly original, C.S. Lewis gives us the correspondence of the worldly wise devil to his nephew Wormwood, a novice demon in charge of securing the damnation of an ordinary young man. And on Goodreads it says it's the most engaging account of temptation and triumph over it ever written. So that is also on my TBR. Next up is Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes, and one of you actually recommended it in a recent video, and I believe you had compared it to Frankenstein, which it's very interesting because I love Frankenstein. I'm pretty sure Frankenstein actually is epistolary. If it is, I guess it does belong in my list of recommendations too, because I do love Frankenstein. But anyways, for Flowers for Algernon, it says, Charlie Gordon is about to embark upon an unprecedented journey. Born with an unusually low IQ, he has been chosen as the perfect subject for an experimental surgery that researchers hope will increase his intelligence, a procedure that's been highly successful when tested on a lab mouse named Algernon. As the treatment takes effect, Charlie's intelligence expands until it surpasses that of the doctors who engineered his metamorphosis. The experiment appears to be a scientific breakthrough of paramount importance until Algernon suddenly deteriorates. Will the same happen to Charlie? And it looks like this was written in the 60s, so it is a modern classic, and it sounds really, really interesting. And this one is told in journal entries, so very, very intrigued. And then we also have a classic that comes in at a whopping 1,500 pages, 1,534 pages for the Penguin Classics edition. I'm talking about Clarissa, or The History of a Young Lady by Samuel Richardson. This was published in 1748, and I do want to read more books that were published in the 18th century, so this one's on my list. It is massive. I don't know when I will ever read it. I don't know really what it's about. I just know that it is epistolary, and I'm intrigued. So we'll see if I ever get to that one, but it is on my TBR as well. And then we also have Address Unknown by Catherine Cressman Taylor. This one I heard talked about by Jen at Jen's Reading Life. I'll have her channel linked below, but she mentioned this one and it sounds really, really good. It says it's a series of fictional letters between a Jewish art dealer living in San Francisco and his former business partner who has returned to Germany. Address Unknown is a haunting tale of enormous and enduring impact. And it says it was published in 1938. It ended up being banned in Nazi Germany. So it just sounds like a must read, especially because it is told in letters, and it looks like it's only 64 pages. It's very, very short. So another one that I'm very intrigued by. And then another book that is also told in letters, and I'll finish off my TBR with this book, that is the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. I have seen this movie years ago and I really liked it, but I just never ended up reading the book. And it is on my TBR. It is told, I believe, fully in letters. So it says, January 1946, London is emerging from the shadow of the Second World War, and writer Juliet Ashton is looking for her next book subject. Who could imagine that she would find it in a letter from a man she's never met, a native of the island of Guernsey, who has come across her name written inside a book by Charles Lamb. And then it goes on. I'm not going to read the rest of it, but I did really like the movie, so I need to read this one as well. Anytime you look up epistolary novels, this is one of the first books that come up, so I really need to read it. But that is my list. Those are the books that I would recommend, as well as the ones still on my TBR. And if you have any more recommendations for me for epistolary novels, please do let me know in the comments. I would love to get more recommendations. I'm always looking out for another epistolary novel to read. I love reading journal entries. I love reading letters. It just, I don't know, it brings me joy, and I feel so much closer to the characters, even though I don't always prefer first person. It's not my favorite, but there's just something about the letter format and journal entries that I love. So that was a blabbery ending, but thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.